October of 1999 was, firstly, 1999 was a great year of films, but in October of 1999, there was a movie that came out that you couldn't really talk about. It's the first two rules of this movie. That is Fight Club. Fight Club came out in October of 1999 to mixed critical reception. On top of that, it didn't really make that much at the box office, despite having like a $60 million budget. Now, I know $60 million now doesn't really sound that much in terms of the film industry, but think about it 20 years ago. That's the equivalent of like $130 million budget on a original film that's based on a book that isn't the type of thing where you can make a sequel. So it was a risk. I mean, this was risky filmmaking at its finest. I mean, David Fincher is one of my favorite directors, and Fight Club, I'm not gonna lie, is always one of those movies where I just didn't get it the first or second viewing. I would say I just didn't understand it. I didn't understand why it was so popular because I found it entertaining, but I just couldn't really obtain why everyone thinks it's one of the best movies of all time. And even now, I do really like it. Like, it is a movie that I've always been thinking about and I would always come back to. But despite not thinking it's a perfect movie, I think it's a really well made movie. Fight Club is a movie that is right up my alley. It's about a young man played by Edward Norton who he's not happy with his life. He's not really happy with his job, and so he goes seeking out the help of a young man played by Brad Pitt, known as Tyler Durden. Together, these two they start creating fight clubs to essentially help them fight the battle of consumerism, toxic masculinity. There's just a lot going on in this movie, and I think that's one of the reasons why I like it, as well as David Fincher's directing is top notch. It's very fast paced directing, and on top of that, the cinematography is great. I mean, the camera work is fantastic, and David Fincher is one of my favorite directors because he will utilize CGI even in the early days of when he first started out, like in the '90s. He utilizes CGI in a way where you don't even think about it. You don't even think about the fact that he's using it because it's like, oh wow, like I would not have thought that was CGI. It's just mind-boggling how great he is at utilizing it. I'll get into that in the negatives because there's a couple nitpicks I will say about that, but for the most part, it's top-notch stuff. On top of that, the acting, this is Brad Pitt and Edward Norton at the top of their games. Both give great performances. It's also nice to see Jared Leto and Helen Bonham Carter in this movie. Nice little touches. Also, this movie is darkly comical. It's not like laugh out loud funny for me. It's just more like chuckles for me personally. But it's like the type of chuckles where I can enjoy, and it is like a quotable movie. But it's not just that. The impact of the movie, I think, with that final scene, it's great because that last scene alone says everything that you need to know about this movie because it really does change each viewing that you watch it. You know, like you can watch this movie and think that it's a LGBTQ movie. I know it's going to sound crazy, but I mean, you can look at Tyler Durden's relationship with the narrator and say, oh wow, there's like homoerotic tones going on here. Or you can rewatch it and say, oh wow, this is like saying a lot about consumerism mostly, or just about toxic masculinity and the problems of it and the problems of this generation as well as our generation, and each generation has problems. I like that. I like how each time you watch this movie, you get something out of it, you know, and that's a really good indication of a good movie. I think is that you have a different experience each time you watch, and it's not like the same experience, just diluted. Because truth of the matter is, there are certain movies you'll watch where it's impactful the first time, and then each viewing the impact is diluted. Not the case with this movie. If anything, like I said, like when I first saw this movie like 4 or 5 years ago, I wasn't the biggest fan of it. I respected it, but I didn't love it. I didn't understand why people liked it. I understand now why people love it. It's not one of my favorite movies. In fact, if you've seen my David Fincher ranking video, you'll notice this movie's not even my top five of David Fincher's. I respect it and all, but it's not top five tier. It's like number six for me, I believe it is. It's really well made. It's very well handled with all the tones and the messages, and that ending is impactful. And it's definitely a touchstone in our culture. I mean, for crying out loud, this is the movie that inspired Mr. Robot. Has also had a great line from Game Night, where Game Night referenced this movie. I mean, Fight Club really is a touchstone of our culture, and I really appreciate it for that. But it's not a perfect movie. at least every time I watch it, there's always a couple things that kind of bother me. For one, the movie's 90% of CGI is really good, but then there are like 10% of it where it's just like it just kind of bothers me. Like the sex scene between Helen Bonham Carter and Brad Pitt, it just doesn't look convincing. I don't know if it did 20 years ago, but it just doesn't really look convincing. And lo and behold, of course, it was CGI. Like if you look it up, um, as well as there are a couple hints here or there, but again, it's just minor gripes for me personally at this point. I mean, there's nothing outright to say that this movie it's not good because of this or this. I'm just saying that there are little nitpicks here and there for me as to why I don't fully embrace it as like a masterpiece the way a lot of people do. But nonetheless, Fight Club, if you haven't seen it by now, I don't know what you're doing, but I would still recommend you watch this. It's a really well made movie. David Fincher's signature directorial touches there. And yeah, that's why Fight Club for me personally, I'll be giving it a 4.5 out of 5 rating, which, for those like hot sauce rating, it's the good old Tabasco rating. That's right, everyone. It's the good old Tabasco rating, which means it's really good. Again, not a perfect movie, but still very well made. Guys, that's my thoughts on Fight Club. Spoiler free, of course. What did you think of Fight Club? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Did you get to see it in theaters when it first came out? I know I didn't. I was too young. But let me know your thoughts on this film in the comment section down below. What's your favorite David Fincher film? Comment section below. And as always, the subscription, notification bell, and I'll catch you guys later.